It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Dia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Brian from Ohio.
Ohio!
And you're listening to...
the best podcast in the whole universe!
Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Hope everyone's having a great weekend. We're definitely drowning with rain here in the Pacific Northwest. Tonight we'll be chatting with Randy. And in 2020, Randy was invited to his friend's property in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. And Randy describes the vibes around this cabin, the feeling of being watched, and all of this kind of led up to his encounter where Randy and his ex-girlfriend ran from this creature. And this whole incident kind of led Randy on this journey in search for answers. Then we'll be also speaking with Jane. And Jane actually just returned from Spain. She had this very strange encounter about 2 weeks ago. And for long-term members, they might know what she ran into. I don't think it was Dogman. I think it was something else. But I'll let her go into it. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Randy to the show. Randy, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And you had this incident back in 2020, and it takes place in New Hampshire. If you would just kind of start from the very beginning, what were you doing and what happened?
Yeah, so at the time, like most people, it was kind of an uncertain period in time, I was working full time down in southern Massachusetts. I live in Rhode Island. And like I said, I'm a licensed plumber and gas fitter. When COVID had come around, everyone was a little unsure what was going to happen. There was the shutdown pretty much everywhere. So as that kind of came into place, people were kind of laid off for the time being because of that shutdown. For me, and instead of kind of going home for who knows how long and sitting in place, I had a really good friend of mine growing up. Him and his family owned several rental properties up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire for skiing, hiking, that kind of thing. They had actually just bought another one, not long before COVID happened. And my buddy and his father had been asking me if I'd be interested in coming up and doing some plumbing and some heating work there and helping them out. And I was more than happy to. I was just hoping for the time. So when COVID rolled around, it was kind of a perfect opportunity to spend a little time with one of my good friends, his family that I'm close with, and enjoy one of the states that I love the most. So my girlfriend at the time and myself kind of packed up and headed north. It was kind of crazy too. On the way up, you're usually sitting in traffic and everyone's everyone's getting ready for their vacation too. But I think we made it up in record time. There was maybe a few cars on the road. Looked like something out of The Walking Dead, you know? So we got up there and it was a great setup. There's a road on a specific mountain, actually on the northern edge of the White Mountains that he lived on, or he had a property on, and his family actually owned the property right across the street from it too. And his parents and sister and everything were staying in one house, and myself, my former girlfriend and my really good friend Carl were staying in the other house across the street. Really quiet street, only a few houses on it, and right on a pretty prominent mountain named after one of the presidents. So we kind of hunkered down there for a while. I was working on the other property and, you know, enjoying our time. We did a lot of hiking, just really making the best out of a bad situation, which ended up actually being fairly enjoyable. This was probably late winter, early spring. My girlfriend at the time was kind of having a tough time with the whole COVID situation. She was really, really worried about what was going on at home and family, and understandably, but I tried to kind of put her at ease and tell her we were in a good spot and this is probably the best case scenario, and I think everyone at home is going to be okay, and, you know, keep in touch. And she was having her ups and downs and kind of was getting bad vibes from the property to begin with. And at the time, I couldn't put my finger on it. You know, I was just happy to be up in the woods. Mind you, I grew up, spent 10 years in this area, hiking, backpacking. I'm a veteran. I spent some time in the Air Force. I went through survival training out in Washington State, out in the woods for a while, which was fun. So I'm comfortable in the woods. I'm comfortable in that area. I'm a big outdoorsman, so nothing really bothered me about it. We kind of got to the point, we were comfortable up there. We had been there maybe a month and a half, and got into a nice routine, kind of switch off making dinner for everybody and just making the best of it. What had happened was outside this property, the dirt driveway pulled in off a dirt road, and the house was right on the left. It was just redone. It was beautiful. If you continued straight right to the driveway, it turned into lawn, and that lawn just kept going down an old, I believe it was a snowmobile trail. It was pretty wide, but the trails would go forever. You could get to Canada, up to Maine, over to Vermont. You can go for days and days with no issues. So we had decided one night before starting dinner that we'd take a little walk down the trail. It's about, I'd say, 3/4 of a mile at a slight slope going down. Had a couple inches of snow still on the ground for that time of year, maybe 2.5, 3 inches of snow. So myself, my former girlfriend, and my good friend Carl, we each just grabbed a single beer. We're like, we're going to go down, kind of watch the sunset over the presidentials. So up there, I'm usually, if I'm out in the woods hiking or doing whatever, I usually have a handgun on me just for protection. I mean, there's black bear, moose, coyote, all kinds of things up there, you know. At this point, Sasquatch was not something that had ever really entered my mind, you know. I was a little more closed-minded at that time in my life. Kind of into the alien topic. I'll be honest. It was kind of popping off a little bit since 2017 at that time, and I was kind of really into it. But even in that case, Bigfoot was really never on my radar. I thought maybe when I was younger, if it'd be kind of cool if there was one out in Washington State, you know, kind of interesting. But I never really thought it possible. Didn't really make a lot of sense. So we ended up going down this trail. It took about, I'd say, 20, 25 minutes to get down the hill. And there's a big opening once you come down this trail on the right-hand side, which you stop and turn, and it overlooks the entire presidential range. You can see Washington. You can see everything. It's beautiful, beautiful. And at the time, the tops were white, and the further you look down, it got to be better. And it was, all the leaves were gone still, but it was just a beautiful scene. Right there on the trail was a wooden bench that I think it was the previous owner, prior to Carl's family buying the property, who had basically carved a little wooden bench out of some old logs. And it was nice. You could sit right there and look right out the presidential. So when you're kind of sitting, I'll try and set the scene a little bit better. When you're sitting on that bench, you have your back kind of going up the mountain that my buddy lives on. And then you're looking out at the presidentials. If to your left, the trail continues downhill, a lot darker and a little less welcoming. And then to our right was uphill back to the house. We sat for a while. We talked and kind of about just everything going on in the world. And how we were doing and what we were hoping to do after it all ended. So got a little bit later, and my buddy Carl had said he was ready to head back and start some dinner and before the sun went down, and I thought it wasn't a bad idea, you know. So I had turned to my girlfriend at the time and asked if she was ready, and for someone that was not too fond of that area in the woods in the dark, it was a little strange that she was pretty reluctant to go, which I knew she was going through a lot at the time, so I figured maybe she needed just a little more time. So I told Carl, why don't you head on back and get dinner going, and we'll catch up. So he did that and started walking up the hill, and I kind of let her do her thing, and she was having a pretty emotional moment, looking out at the stars that are starting to pop out, and you could see Jupiter at that point and the mountains and everything, and she was getting a little emotional, and I didn't want to pull her away from it, you know. But at the same time, I was starting to get the hard word to put my finger on. Like I said at the time, I knew nothing about any of this, so it was an unusual feeling for me out in the woods there. I guess nerves to start, like a slow trickling in of nerves. So I asked if she was ready again, and to my surprise, she turned to me and said, "No, just leave me." That was a little strange. I don't know if that has any connection to anything that happened, but it was almost the exact opposite of what I expected out of her at that moment. Telling me to head home and leave her out in the woods as the sun set and somewhere she was unfamiliar and not too fond of. So I didn't know if maybe she was just being difficult or what was going on. So I wasn't going to leave her there by herself at all. So I was about, I'd say 30 feet away from her, closer to the house. She was a little further down the trail in that direction. I was still looking out of the mountains, and at this point she had turned around and was staring straight up at the mountain that we were on into the woods. So me in a kind of a childish protest, kind of just sat down in the snow, knees up to my chest and just staring forward, not really saying anything, just kind of waiting for her to be ready. While I was sitting there, she was still staring in the woods and a little emotional, getting a little more and more emotional. And at this point I had started to hear something behind me. On the mountain that we were on. And it sounded at first just like a little bit of rustling, maybe a twig. And I mean, we are way up there in the mountains, so it could have been anything, you know? So at that point, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it caught my attention. Kind of looked over at her, asked if she was ready, and she didn't respond. She just kept staring at the woods. And at that point, I heard something behind me again. So I turned my head to the right, looking up toward the house to kind of put my ear toward the woods and see if I could kind of lock onto what was happening. And I started to hear what sounded like very deliberate movement, which I know a lot of animals are very deliberate in what they do. I know a deer wouldn't be carefully and deliberately walking up behind me. It sounded a bit more cautious and time in between. And at that point, I knew something was kind of going on. I wasn't sure what it was, but I kind of knew something was going on. My body was kind of telling me that. The hair on the back of my neck started to go up, and I started to get like a weird shake in my hands as I kept listening. Still really unsure of kind of what was happening, but I sat there quietly. And while I was really attentive on that, my girlfriend at the time, down to my left, about 30 feet and a little down the hill, started saying my name, just casually at first as Randy. I kind of didn't ignore it, but just didn't really catch it because my attention was behind me. Said my name again. And she said, "There's an owl." So I kind of brushed it off because what I was listening to or honing in on seemed a little more important at the time. She said it again. And then after she said it the second time, it must have been 2 feet from her face up in the tree. I couldn't see it because it was in the woods, but an owl just started going off right in front of her, which isn't anything, I guess, too unusual. Just time and place, I guess. So her quote unquote existential moment, that's what I was kind of referring to it at the time, got a little heavier and she started crying, which I can understand. It was kind of a cool moment for her, I think. I don't know if she could see the actual bird in the tree, but it was hooting at her, not too far from her. So that was a little strange. I was looking at her at that moment. She was just staring up into the trees, kind of tears coming down her face. And turned my head to the right to put my attention back on the woods behind me, and I couldn't hear anything. At that moment, there was a second owl a little closer to me, kind of in between the distance that spanned her and I, but a little further into the woods, maybe another 15 feet up the hill behind us. That was a little strange. I know that can happen. I've actually been camping and had 2 owls right above my tent, and they kept me up all night going back and forth. So nothing too crazy, but combined with what was happening behind me and the feeling I was getting, it was kind of a little surreal. I was kind of trying to think of what kind of situation I was in. And I knew it was an owl coming up behind me. I knew that wasn't the case. So I kind of sat there quietly. And at that point, I finally stood up, turned around and squared up to the woods and the sound behind me, hoping to get a glimpse, and kind of had forgotten about what she was handling down there to my right and the moment she was having. At this point, we heard a third vocalization, which came probably another 30 feet behind that second vocalization from that owl. And this one was almost directly behind me, the third one. The sound that I heard, I had never experienced anything like that in my life. It froze me right in place. I was shocked. It was something pretending to be an owl very lazily. It was so deep and so loud. It sounded like a 600 to 700 pound man who smoked 2 packs a day was just giving his laziest impression of an owl. I would try and replicate it, but every time I do, it sounds kind of dumb and it doesn't really get the point across. But when it happened, I felt it. I definitely felt it. It almost felt like it came down the hill and went right through me. It was jarring. I froze. I think my mind just started running through what could be happening to me. Again, I'm a 2-time combat veteran, Afghanistan. I've kind of gotten pretty good at this point of handling nerves and situations like this and how to kind of work through it. This one was completely different. This one, I was at a loss. I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. So I stood there staring into the woods. I can't even imagine the look that was on my face. I was physically and mentally shaken. I think it was a couple seconds later, it all kind of meshes together. At this point, while I'm looking up the hill, to my left, the trail went back up to Carl's house, and to my right, down the hill into the darkness was my ex, and she was standing there about 20 feet away. And while I'm standing, staring up into the woods, frozen, wondering what was happening to me or us, she kind of snapped me out of it by running past me at a full sprint, screaming "run" at the top of her lungs. The look on her face I caught as she ran by, she was completely bawling her eyes out. I'm not sure how to, if you can relate or know what I mean, or if anyone can kind of relate to what I mean, but when you see someone that's in such a state of terror, like pure terror, like their face almost looks a little different. They don't look exactly like them. She seemed very pale. Her face almost looked long with just dread. She came sprinting by, crying and screaming "run." Of course, instinctually, I was right on her tail as soon as she was up that hill, and she was burning up that hill. Did not miss a beat. And like I said, there's probably about 3 to 4 inches of snow still on that ground, 3/4 of a mile uphill back to the house. She ran. She didn't stop for anything. I was right behind her. I kept yelling to her, asking what was going on, what had happened. And she just kept saying "run." I kept on her. It could have been the fear, but it felt like something was right on us. At one point, I kind of got upset with myself for just sprinting, and I don't know, I guess not seeing what was up with the situation when it was unfolding and just running from it. So I ended up stopping, spinning around, squaring up, pulling my light out and pulling my .40 caliber pistol out and pointing it down the trail to see what was happening. And when I did that, she lost it. She started going off on me and just basically told me to let's go, and not such nice words. So holstered the weapon. I turned around and I started sprinting back up the hill. And the fear was real. It was definitely real. We Came out of the canopy into the open yard of my buddy's house. At this point, it was pitch black. She ran right for the door, burst through the door, and just collapses into a ball on the floor, hyperventilating. Can't get a word out and can't breathe. Carl was right across the kitchen, cooking his famous Brussels sprouts, doing great, and he spun around and was also in a state of shock, didn't know what happened, and came running over and was asking me, and I told him, I don't really know, and I'm trying to calm her down. It took a good 20 minutes for her to get into like a sitting position on the floor with the back against the wall and able to kind of breathe and speak to us. I asked her if it was the sound that we heard, if that's what did it. It definitely scared me to a serious degree. So I kind of thought that was it. And she told me no. She said that wasn't what it was. So after kind of coaxing it out of her and getting her to say what happened, she had said that after she heard what I had also heard, she said she kind of felt something to her right and looked to her right and looked down that trail that was coming out of the woods further. And when you think about this trail, there's no leaves on the trees. It's really dark woods when you look into it. But at night, when you look down a trail like this that's lightly coated in snow, it almost glows. It almost illuminates. She said she looked over to the right and something was coming up that path silently. And she said it was down on all fours. And it was big. She said it was taking up that path. And it was coming right up that trail, not making a sound. And she said she literally jumped out of her skin, came up off the ground, and at that point just turned on a dime and sprinted up that hill. And that's when I caught her across my path screaming. I never ended up looking to the right, and I kind of just turned and was right behind her. I regret it sometimes, not that I didn't look to the right, take that opportunity to do that. And sometimes I don't regret it. I don't know if that would have ruined everything for me or maybe just broken me at that moment. So I asked her, like, what do you mean? Like a bear, like a black bear, maybe? She said, no, it wasn't a bear. So maybe like a porcupine. And she got pretty upset with that. She said, Randy, like it wasn't a porcupine. She said it was big, really big, making a sound, and it was coming right up that trail, down close to the ground. At that point, we talked about it the rest of the night. Kind of my buddy made some jokes and some Puckawudgie comments, which is kind of a Native American lore up here in this region, Bridgewater Triangle and everything, which I was familiar with. And there are stories of them with owls and stuff. So I kind of entertained it and laughed. And that was kind of my way of putting her at ease, but it didn't work all that well. A few days later, she kind of, after a tough few days, she had hit her wit's end and ended up heading back down to Rhode Island to her family and didn't want to be up there anymore, which I can't blame her. If I would have saw what she saw, I probably would have done the same. Again, at that point, no thought of Bigfoot, none of that. It was just a creepy experience, and I thought I'd never get an answer for what had happened. I stayed up there with the family, working on the other house for probably another month or so. I couldn't kick that from my mind. I kept talking about it, and there were a lot of things about this and some things that I felt after that. The room I was staying in was on the far right second floor of the house with a whole wall of windows, and all those windows looked right at the head of that path to that snowmobile trail. I didn't realize until a little later on, after coming home, that the feeling I had every time I was in that bedroom at night by myself was drop these shades, because it just felt like I was being watched every time I was in that room. So whenever I went in at night, I'd have to drop the shades and kind of forget that the mouth of that path was over there. Not really think about it. So like I said, I spent probably another 4 to 6 weeks up there. We actually did some camping at a really nice spot on a river in the White Mountains proper. It was a great time. The weather had really warmed up by then, and it was nice. I did wake up that evening while camping, not with this on my mind at all, but I woke up asleep on an air mattress by the fire while my buddy and his sister were asleep in their tent, and the dread that I had when I woke up on that air mattress and that fire had died out, as if I had an audience around me in the woods watching me. It was a really foreign, strange feeling. All I could do was on my hands and knees kind of crawl up to that fire and start throwing twigs in and blowing on it, and get that lit up as fast as I could. And I fed that fire for the rest of the night and kind of laid there wondering why I was so afraid, again, not something I'm used to feeling in the woods. After that, ended up coming back home. Things were opening back up. I was ready to start working again full time and get back to my life. I think I'd been back in Rhode Island and working in Mass full time for a couple months, just hanging out in my apartment at the time. I had a documentary on. Didn't know anything about the documentary. I just had it playing in the background while I was doing a little schoolwork, some night school, some homework. The audio that came out of the documentary made me stop in my tracks and all my hair stood up, and I think my eyes started welling up a little bit, and I looked up and had to pause and see what I was watching, and it was the missing 411, the hunted, and it was the Sierra Sounds from Ron Moorhead. And when I heard those voices going back and the depth and the tones it was hitting the acoustics, it was almost like a post-traumatic stress moment, which I'm a little familiar with, and it overtook my body, and it was a little shocking. So I kind of stopped and realized what I was watching. I didn't even know what this was about. I rewound it and started from the beginning intently. And by the end of it, I was a little shocked that this was a real thing that people were taking seriously, and that might be an explanation for what had happened. At that point, like I said, I had no interest in Bigfoot. And then after experiencing that, the following few nights, I spent some time on my computer just searching New Hampshire, Bigfoot, searching everything. Your podcast came up. I had never heard of it. I thought it looked interesting. The cover photo was really cool. So I figured I'd give it a shot. I Googled a few episodes and started with that. And then from there, it was history. I started from episode 1 and I've listened to them all up to this point. And that kind of changed everything. Listening to other people's encounters and learning that a lot of those aspects that had happened in that night, a lot of other people had experienced. The owl, the lack of effort in being an owl, if that's what it's doing. I don't know if it's messing with you or if it's what's happening. But the big one was when you brought up the spider crawl on the fingers and toes in the push-up position, and a light bulb kind of went off. And I knew at that moment that was probably a good chance of that's what she saw coming up that trail. At this point, her and I weren't talking much. It actually put a big toll on our relationship. I started really getting interested in it, doing a lot more research, and her and I ended up talking again and hanging out a couple times about 6 months later. When I broke it all down to her about the things I had been looking into and what I had learned and what I thought she might have seen, and actually pulled up, I believe it was a photo on one of your episodes, and it's like a animated photo of a Sasquatch down on all fours doing a spider crawl. And I showed it to her, and it was a little tough for her. She got a little upset emotionally and got upset with me. Didn't want to talk about it. So I didn't press. I did end up bringing it up again maybe a week or two later, and it was the same reaction. So I kind of took that as affirmation, but at the same time, I can't be sure. She was really emotional about it and didn't want to speak about it when I showed her that. I haven't spoken since then, and I've kind of left it at that. I'm hoping she's found an outlet for this and what's happened. I know I have, and it's been a lot to do with you and your podcast, which I'm definitely grateful for. To know I'm not crazy, or just to go on the rest of my life just wondering what the hell happened to me out there that time, And after that, after looking into it the past few years, a lot of pieces have kind of fallen into place. Just talking to my brother, my older brother, he's 2 years older than me. He's a great guy. We spent a lot of time as kids up in New Hampshire, just running around the woods barefoot, just getting into trouble. We'd be miles out from where we lived and just doing what we could do. We were really into climbing trees, the biggest trees we could find, and go as high as we could. And at the time, we were about 7 and 9. We were so into it that we would find trees that were so big with no branches down low to access that we grabbed an aluminum extension ladder, and we probably hiked that a mile or two out into the woods through the thicket and everything, getting it out there. And we'd find those trees we wanted, and we set that ladder up and make our way all the way up there. Definitely not the safest thing to do at our age, but it, I guess, kept us out of trouble, if you don't consider that trouble. I was just speaking with him the other day, and he reminded me of a situation. He's not the biggest believer in this, but he did kind of stop me and say, "Do you remember that time we hiked back out to our spot where we had our ladder set up and everything? And when we got out there, that ladder was about 30 feet in the air, and it was stuck across 2 different trees, a rung on each branch." I don't know how you explain that. I guess if someone really wanted to mess with us and bushwhacked 2 miles out there and found the ladder and had a buddy that would climb up with him and do that, sure, more power to him. But that's something kind of unexplained that even he has nothing good for, nothing to guess on. So little things like that. Since looking into all this, I'm a big hiker, and it hasn't ruined the woods for me yet, and that's my biggest fear. But whenever I listen to your episodes, I'll drop a pin on my maps to where I believe that exact location is, no matter the state. I did it out west. I've done it all over New England, New York, and obviously I'm sure you're aware of this already. There's huge clusters everywhere from these stories. So since then, I've found that whenever I'm traveling, I find those spots, and I'll make a point of getting myself out there and looking around, seeing what's going on. And since doing that, I've found some very interesting things. A lot up here in New England, but I found some interesting things out in Arizona, in the Mogollon Rim, after listening to some of those episodes. And I'm not sure if you specifically remember the episode. I believe it was a Navajo Nation member was speaking to you about Potato Lake and the petroglyphs out there on a stone of a bunch of small stick figures being chased by one really large stick figure. That really interested me. So I was on an RV trip with some friends a few years back out in that area, Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce, and we ended up in the Flagstaff area. And I made a point of taking us out to the Mogollon Rim and finding Potato Lake. I had my drone, I had my backpack, and I was ready to go. No one else wanted to come with me. They all hung back by the water in the RV, and I got out and looked at my maps and beelined it up there. I don't know if this has any relation whatsoever or what this means, but when you Google map Potato Lake and you zoom out maybe a tiny bit, the pond next to it, it has to be man-made. There's no chance that this is just by happenstance, but the body of water next to it is the face of a gray alien. And you look at it and it's a perfect head with 2 islands as almond-shaped eyes. It kind of baffled me, nothing to do with Sasquatch, but why is that the case, that the body of water right next to Potato Lake with that petroglyph is a perfect rendition of a gray alien face? So that obviously piqued my interest more. So I made my way up there. It was littered with vertebrae, which I'm assuming from an elk or some kind of really large deer, all over the hillside. Got up to the top, flew my drone up. Both bodies of water were pretty dry at that time. Didn't find anything. As I was packing up, I looked over my left, and right there next to me in the snow, there was patchy snow in the mountains there. There was a clear as day footprint, bare footprint, bigger than my boot, right there in the snow. I was a little shocked. I felt like someone was messing around with me. I took a bunch of photos, and I started to get creeped out. It was really quiet up there, no wind, no nothing. And once I saw that, and I started to make my way back down. That one was a little jarring. I had to be honest. There were a couple up here that I've experienced since then. With my girlfriend at the time now, Kelly, my current girlfriend, she's really good about my interest in this. At first, when we had first met, she kind of scoffed and brushed it off and thought it was just a dorky interest, and which is fine. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think after being with her for a while and kind of exposing her to your podcast and some of the stuff that I've come across, she's come around a little bit. I'm not going to say fully, but she's definitely come around a little bit. She supports me for everything, and she'll listen to everything with me. So we'll take trips up north, and no matter the time of year, and we've had some strange stuff happen, and mostly Vermont, some stuff in Vermont while we'll kind of getting away for a ski trip and just a quiet weekend away. We've had some I guess not slaps on the house, but we were way out there with no one around, and only as soon as we got in bed with a movie on did It sounded like something was either standing on the porch or right under the porch and clapping its hands together one at a time, just with like a booming crack. The first time it did it, it kind of shocked me. Got up, looked outside, nothing going on. We would go maybe 5 minutes in between, just quietly listening, play the movie again and try to forget about it. And then boom, clap right again. Happened about 3 or 4 times until she started to get a little shaken. And I started to get a little shaken. So I went and I grabbed my pistol and I sat out on the couch with all the lights off in front of the huge exposed glass doors and just looked out, waiting to at least get a glimpse of what was happening, whether it was, I don't know. It couldn't have been rocks. It was a metal roof. It would have sounded different. It sounded like 2 hands coming together with a lot of force. I sat out there for probably 45 minutes looking out that window and it never happened again. When I finally got back up, went back into the bedroom and laid down, she was kind of half asleep. And as soon as I got under those covers and got comfortable, it boom happened again. My adrenaline started bumping. And I think at that point I just passed out from just exhaustion. We had no explanation for it. The next morning we looked around. There was no prints, no nothing. I was looking for something that was maybe banging against the house. Nothing. It was clean as a whistle out there. So that one stuck with her. That one definitely stuck with her. It stuck with me as well. Found some interesting prints that week too. I had some photos of, and so needless to say, I've kind of got my eyes out open all the time now. Wherever we go, I've turned into that Bigfoot guy, at work and among a group of friends. And at first it was a little embarrassing, but now I embrace it fully. I'm pretty confident of what's going on out there, and I don't need to prove that to anyone. So I take everything with a grain of salt, and I'm kind of wear it as a badge of honor at this point. I'm a little too old to get embarrassed by those things. So it's more fun than anything, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing it, Randy. So this one moment kind of sent you on this lifelong journey of searching for answers. And I admire that. And thank you for being a member of the site. Thank you for supporting what I do. And I didn't get it at the time in the beginning when you were saying you heard this vocalization, but you weren't going to try and imitate it because, you're not sure if you can. And I'm with you. I don't think I can imitate the Sierra sounds, but both of you guys were hearing that up there?
Yeah, we did. We both did. To her, it wasn't as important of a point, I guess, because of what she saw afterwards. But for me, that was, I didn't see what she did. So that stuck with me pretty hard. We both heard it.
I know sometimes trauma prevents it, but it's too bad that she wouldn't go into more detail about what she saw. I guess you got your answer when you showed her the picture of a Sasquatch doing the spider crawl. And obviously bears don't move like that, but just everything that was going on there, that owl call, you'll often hear eyewitnesses say, it sounded like a 600-700 pound owl just going off, and you're hearing the chatter and then her freaking out the moment she saw what she saw coming up the trail, and the way she describes it being so big coming up that trail. Black bears aren't that big. Nothing about it sounds like a black bear.
No, they're not. And I mean, if you think about it too, there was still snow on the ground. It seemed a little early for any bear to kind of be out doing that kind of thing. And if that's the case, they're going to be really ornery and hungry if that's kind of like a rogue bear that's out right then. And us running like that, I don't think I would have turned around and not seen a bear coming after us if we're sprinting up that hill.
Do you think it was actually chasing you? Because I know when you're scared, that fear takes over, and instead of fight, that flight takes in, and you take off running. I would imagine in that moment, the answer would be, of course it's chasing us. But looking back now, do you think it was actually chasing you?
Exactly. And when I look back at it now, I'd have to imagine it wouldn't. I think I probably would have heard a lot more, because if it was off trail, it would have been crashing through those woods. If it was on trail, then, you'd like to think I would have seen it when I turned around, which I didn't. But at the same time, it's almost that feeling as a kid when you hit the light at your bedroom door and you got to sprint and jump to clear the underneath the bed. You don't know why you're doing it, but you're almost a little quicker and jump a little higher in that moment, And I think that's what it was. And I think it's human instinct when someone starts running and you see that fear in them, that it's instinctual to kind of hightail behind them,
Yeah, I agree. Your girlfriend was talking about kind of bad vibes on the property, and you talked about it a little bit. Did she ever go, I mean, was it that feeling of being watched, or did she ever go into those bad vibes?
She did. She said that. She said she felt like she was being watched. For me, when I think back at it now, I think it was a similar feeling. I don't know if I would have put those exact words on it, but it was more of the guy who had owned the home before my buddy was an older gentleman. He actually passed away in the home. So, I kind of brushed it off to maybe there's just bad vibes in the house. They remodeled it shortly after, and it looked really nice. It looked really different. I thought maybe it's, we're up in New Hampshire, we're up in the woods. This is a setting for a Stephen King book if there ever was one. And the vibes might have just been that playing on me with the guy who had passed away in the home. But, the more I had thought about it and the more I listened and looked into this, it's a lot of people have thought their homes were haunted. And there's a possibility that it's just these things on the property, which there wasn't, to my knowledge, any actual like harassment at the home proper. But the vibes were definitely there. It was a little dark, I could never really put my finger on it, but it was during the day when I'm out there with my buddy and, his family, whatever, you kind of forget about it. But when you're kind of just milling around and kind of not thinking about much, you kind of get that heavy feeling of it's just not it's different, it's different.
In almost every Native American culture, they'll talk about how not to look these things in the eyes. Don't look them in the eyes. And I've asked many Native Americans and a few chiefs why, and I'm thinking it's like you're looking at a gorilla. You don't want to piss it off. In almost every culture, they talk about it's this weird, they'll put you in a trance if you look them in the eyes for too long. And I always thought, what a weird thing to say. I mean, but you kind of described that with your ex. She kind of sat there. It sounded like she was in a trance. What do you make of that?
I mean, after you saying that, that's kind of fits the bill a little bit. It's a little shocking. I've never heard that. That would make, I guess if you believe in all this and you believe that that's, and I believe that that's what happened to me and us out there, then I guess that would make a little more sense than an owl actually being there right in front of her at that moment and her having this existential moment with a wild animal while all these other things are going on. Yeah, that's a little creepy that you put it that way.
Yeah, just her whole behavior was off. I mean, for someone who's kind of scared of the area and getting bad vibes, to be out there and be like, just leave me. And you and I know that how women are sometimes. I mean, it's a trap. You don't leave. Otherwise, you'll never hear the end of it. But yeah, just her behavior of that whole situation really makes me wonder. Your buddy that owns the property, have you ever talked to him since this happened? And is there anything else going on there?
Oh yeah, I talked to him a lot. He ended up actually moving out to North Carolina, and he just got married. He's got a baby on the way, so he's got a lot going on. But I see him; he's up here a lot. We spend a lot of time together. It's still one of my closest friends. Immediately after that encounter, he busted chops a lot. You know what I mean? He wasn't a big believer in any of that. Since then, he's come around. He's definitely come around. I send him stuff. He sends me stuff. He finds it interesting. He's definitely not as serious as I am about it, but he's come around. I think he's a little hard pressed to maybe ask his parents about that. I don't know if his parents would really entertain that idea. And at this point, his parents are actually down here full time. They rent those two properties, the one that we were in and then the one across the street, full time. They rent those out to families that live up there. So, trust me, I would kill to have the opportunity to go up there and knock on the door and just talk to the family for a little bit. Maybe one day that could be a possibility or get in touch with them through my friend. But for right now, I'm just wondering,
Yeah, let me know if you ever go up there. I would like to know if you find out anything. And I get why your girlfriend, if she saw that spider crawl, when you see it, it looks more alien than anything else in that motion. I get her freaking out. And you know this, Randy, you've been a member now for a couple of years. I ask everyone on the show, what do you think Sasquatch is? And over the last 4 years of kind of looking into this, what do you think?
This is the tough one. I knew this was coming, obviously. It changes, to be honest. I'll have stints of time where I kind of really get back into this, and stints of time where life gets busy and you know how it goes and you're not really as involved in it or looking into it as much. And I guess during those down times, it kind of creeps in that, yeah, this has got to be some kind of relic hominid or some kind of, I guess, missing link or something that survived and is doing a great job out there. I know you dismiss a lot of information and facts when you think of it that way. But when I'm really looking into it, when my mind's really going, I think obviously the Nephilim theory is one. I've read the Book of Enoch. I'm not the biggest religious guy. I've read a good bit of the Bible, read the Book of Enoch. I'm pretty well versed on it though. And, it does seem to fit a lot of it, especially with some of the other things that people are experiencing out there and not just Bigfoot. It's interesting. There's one thing that I had heard a few years back. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's kind of a long shot, but there was I don't remember what I was watching, some ancient history show, and they were maybe something on Gaia, but they were talking about this supposed lost continent, I believe, out in the Pacific. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the continent. It was either Mu or Mu. It was like MUMO, and the depictions of that continent, obviously, cartographers back then would kind of pencil in or draw little interesting points all across the area. And if you look at that, it shows some type of human being, I guess. But what's really interesting about it is the feet on these characters are massive. It shows this continent that's no longer there, and it shows the inhabitants with almost cartoonish looking feet, huge. So I guess if you subscribe to the whole Atlantis theory, you subscribe to the flood, the deluge, and the Book of Enoch, that almost, if those are all on point, that almost falls into place that maybe something happened and this is some kind of relic hominid from a place like that out there that's surviving.
Yeah, the continent of Mu, it's MU. The lost continent of Mu. I'm glad I'm not the only, weirdo looking into strange history, man. I was kind of shocked when you brought that up. It seems like I'm always looking into stuff like that. I mean, I could do a whole show on this, the continent of Mu, and but it actually started in the early 1800s. I believe the guy's name was Augustus. I can't remember his last name, but he claimed to have translated these Mayan texts. And then through the church, he got access to these tablets from India that are supposedly written by the priests of Mu. And it's a strange account. I mean, there's a portion of the continent of Mu where they talk about this mountain range called Hawaii. And the whole speculation is that, there was a flood. It got flooded out. What we see of Hawaii today is the mountains of Mu. It's a strange one, and it's cooler looking into stuff like that. It's amazing how one event in your life can kind of put you on a journey of looking for answers. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing what happened. And thank you for your service, by the way.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. That means a lot. And I
strong science background, and then went into the medical field as well. And in general, I'd have to say that I was skeptical, but me and my partner have been listening to your podcast, and, we've watched some documentaries and stuff, and it's always fascinated me. And I am not good with this subject at all, so I cannot explain like the laws and stuff, but I kind of went into the topic of quantum physics, and then also listened to and watched a lot of documentaries just kind of on space and time. And it sort of had me second guessing some of my own belief systems, and certainly opened my mind to the possibility that there are things out there that we don't understand. At a quantum physics level, a lot of things don't function within the laws of other disciplines of science. And if a lot of the things that these scientists say is true that I've watched, I've come to the belief that it's possible they exist. So that's kind of where I've settled, in my opinion, is it's possible. And then certainly after my experience, I feel a bit shaken by it, and we'll probably go back and listen to some other episodes with a bit more of an open mind.
Well, if you would, take me back 2 weeks ago. What were you doing and what happened?
So yeah, we went to Spain for about a month for vacation, just to kind of disconnect from the world, not a lot of cell phones, no TV. And we rented a camper van and we traveled. We did the Costa Brava region of Spain, but our main reason for being there was the Pyrenees Mountains. So we spent most of our time in that mountain range, and we kind of just traveled from town to town and would park for a couple of nights and just go hiking and be out in nature. And we eventually landed into a very small mountain town called Sort, Spain. And we found a campground there, and we rented, I think it was only one night actually. So we were there for one night. That's kind of where this experience happened, was in Sort, Spain, at one of their campgrounds. I'm not going to say which one because I don't really want to, put them on blast, but we had a normal day and we came home to the camper van and just hung out and made dinner. And sort of late at night, and this is important because I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's kind of why I ended up being outside in the first place, because I don't make the habit of like going out at 1 a.m, walking around in the dark, typically, especially because I'm a woman. But me and my partner, we were stressed out from driving the van, and there were some other things at play, and we kind of got into a really heated discussion, which isn't normal for us. And it got so heated that I got upset enough that I just threw a jacket on and I left the camper van. We were parked sort of towards the office. So I just started walking away from the camper van and kind of away from the center of the entire campground. And there were a few lights, but not many. And I got all the way to the edge. I passed several campers on my way. And there was a kind of like it used to be, sort of like a fountain maybe, but it wasn't working anymore. And it was just like in a circle. It was made of bricks. I sat down on that, and in front of me, it was very dark, very, very dark. In these small mountain towns, there's not a lot of light pollution. And so I sat down and I just kind of looked at my phone and had a good cry to get it all out of my system, and was just kind of sitting in the quietness of the night. And I don't know what prompted this. I don't know if it was like my gut or sixth sense, but I looked up from my phone and looked straight ahead, and I could make out the faint images of some trees, but then it looked like this dog sort of glided or trotted up towards me, maybe like 30 feet away. And by the time my eyes adjusted to the darkness, it had turned sideways, but its head was turned looking directly at me. And it was bone white in color, and it was very skinny and tall, taller than a coyote. What I remember is that, I put my cell phone away and there was no light at this point, but its eyes were, I guess, glowing. The color would be if you took like a really bright fluorescent bulb and mixed it with like the really yellow bulb. It sort of looked like that. And at first, I thought to myself, Lauren, it's dark out. Your eyes are playing tricks on you. So I kept staring at it. It felt like a long time, but honestly, it was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. It wasn't moving. It wasn't making sound. I didn't smell anything at all. And so I decided, well, I didn't decide. I just shifted my weight a little bit on the bricks and it moved. It kind of like did this like start. And I just remember thinking, holy crap, this is not my eyes playing a trick on me. This is real. And I just got struck with an inexplicable fear. I've been bit by a cane corso before, and I was not nearly as afraid in that scenario as I was in this scenario. And I love dogs, and I would probably, my partner teases me, but I'd probably pet a coyote if it came up to me. But this was different. I had no good feeling at all about whatever was in front of me. And something in my head said, get up and run. And I did. I got up immediately, and it was quite dark on the path initially where I was at as I turned around to go back to my camper van. And I just started running, and it was very rocky, and I had sandals on, and I was running as fast as I could without falling down or breaking an ankle in that scenario. I did not have the right footwear to be running like that. I tried to get my phone to come on for a flashlight, and I was too scared. I was shaking and I couldn't get it on. And I remember I looked back over my left shoulder to try to see if this thing is chasing me, because I had a sense that it was. And I had this sense that this thing is going to bite me. I'm about to get bit. I don't know what this is, but I'm about to get bit. And I looked behind me and I saw its eyes, and it was following me. And at that point, I yelled out, and I didn't think anyone heard me because no one came out to help me. And as I hit the more lidded area of the campground right before I got to our camper van, I had this sense of it was gone, but I didn't look back. I was too afraid. I immediately shot into the camper van, and I was sobbing and shaking violently. And I told him what happened. He held me for a little while, and I was just so ramped up I couldn't sleep, but we locked the doors, locked all of our windows, and we decided that we would go back in the morning to look for footprints essentially. But I told my partner the thing that really wigged me out the most was two scenarios. The fact that when it glided towards me or trotted, I really can't tell you. I don't remember exactly what that part looked like, but I remember distinctly that it made no sound. I didn't hear any shuffling of dirt, no rustling of bushes, no breathing, no growling, nothing. And the same thing was true as I was running through the campground. It made no noise at all. And, we got up the next morning around 8 a.m. and we went out to the area, and there were no footprints at all, other than there were two small regular dog-like paw prints, but it looked old. It didn't look fresh at all. And I guess the day before it rained, so it was quite muddy where I was at, and yet there were no footprints. And I'm not sure what I saw, but I just remember thinking, I don't think this is a dog. I know it looks like a dog, but it looks very different than any dog I've ever seen. And it behaved differently than any dog I've been around. And I don't think it was, I believe Spain does not have coyotes, but they do have their own form of wolves. And I looked it up, and it's not the same thing. Their wolves have bigger bodies, and they're furry. And that's the other thing. I'm sorry, I forgot about this part. The body of it looked like it had no fur. It just looked like bone white with no fur. If it did have fur, it had to have been very matted down because it didn't have a lot of texture. And when you look at the pictures of the wolves in Spain, they have very furry textured coats. And so that's why I don't think it was that particular animal. And I'm just not quite sure it was an animal at all. I have no clue what I saw, but I know that it scared me so bad that I'm afraid to go hiking again by myself. And I've been hiking for well over a decade and have done a lot of hiking by myself. And I don't really feel comfortable doing that anymore. And that's why I contacted the show, is I want to, get an opinion on what it is that I might have seen. I don't have a lot of knowledge in this area. And I haven't really ever spoken to anyone personal that's ever had an experience with Bigfoot or cryptids or, anything outside kind of like the bounds of science. I've never met anyone that's had an experience like this. And that's why I wanted to contact the show.
And I know from talking to you, you were thinking it was a Dogman. I don't think it was a Dogman. I think it was something else. But let me ask you, how close did it get to you at the closest?
Maybe 30 feet. I'm trying to in my mind, lay out like a person that's 6 feet and kind of extrapolate, probably like 30 feet.
And I know you described it as kind of that bone white color, which makes me wonder if I might know what you ran into. But would you describe it? I mean, would you compare it to a known dog?
If you've ever seen the huskies that run that pull sleds, I've seen them twice in Alaska. I've done dog sledding. They're not as fluffy and big as the huskies that I'm used to kind of like here in the South and other places, because those are fluffier, but these are very lean dogs. So in that respect, that's what it reminded me of, except that its legs were way longer. Like it was really tall for a dog, tall and skinny. And I don't even remember seeing its paws on the ground. I wasn't focused on that. I was just focused on like the meat of the body and its eyes looking directly at me. So it was like long and slender and tall legs. And like I said, there was no visible fur that I could see. It wasn't see-through. It didn't look like a ghost, but it also didn't quite look solid either. And it had a very, the glowing eyes, and it had a longer kind of pointed snout, and it had kind of like, I don't know if its ears were just up at attention, but they were definitely like pointed and upward. And it didn't move or do anything until I shifted. And that's all I really remember, because I was so afraid that like your brain just kind of like scrambles itself when you're that afraid. I 100% understand now when people say, why didn't you get a picture of it? Your brain is not worried about getting a picture of this thing. Your brain is worried about getting away from danger. And so I understand now why, if these things are real and if Bigfoot is real, why so many people, even though they may have close encounters, don't get around to taking a picture, because you go into fight or flight. And obviously I chose flight, and most people do.
Yeah, it's too bad that you didn't get a chance to look at the feet. The feet give it away as far as what it is, but it's interesting. You had mentioned the eyes were glowing, and I don't know if you said blue or not. Was it blue, the eyes?
No, they looked like a mixture, like a warm light bulb, not like the very fluorescent color or the very like yellow color, but a mixture. And what struck me in hindsight as odd about that is that where it had approached from, there were no lights. This was at the end of the boundary of the campground. It was pretty pitch black with just some faint trees. No light was shining on it. We actually ran into a bear in Shenandoah National Park at night, and we couldn't see it. We could hear it growling. And the only way that we even knew it was a bear is when we took our flashlight and flashed it in the bushes. It stood up and you saw its eyes start to glow. Well, it glowed like that, but there was no light being shined on it. So I don't understand how it was reflecting like that. And that's something that also just really frightens me, because that's not normal.
And I don't expect you to say exactly where you're at, but were you in northern Spain?
Yes, we were in the Pyrenees Mountains. Yep. We were, so the Pyrenees sit pretty much on the border, half and half between Spain and France. And it is just wild mountain range after wild mountain range.
Can I ask you, and you may not be able to answer it, but this thing's 30 feet away from you, and all of a sudden you get this overwhelming fear, like you need to leave. What do you think caused that?
I can't explain that. That's what baffles me. I'm not afraid of dogs. I mean, even after being bit by a cane corso, I'm still not afraid of dogs. It was just this sort of guttural instinct, just like a sudden thought in my head. You need to run, and you need to run right now. And I just followed that instinct. But I don't know why my brain told me to do that. But I felt like I was in danger.
I can tell you what I think you ran into. I would take it with a grain of salt because it's nothing more than my opinion, and I wasn't there. But what I think you ran into is the El Cadejo, or the Cadejo, and it actually comes from South America. And I've talked to 3 witnesses that have seen it. 2 were in South America. 1 was in Spain. Spain has their own legend about it, but it's this entity it's actually 2 entities that you can run into. One is a white dog, and the other one is a black dog, but they're not dogs. And if you run into the black one, it's kind of a possession of death. It's a terrible omen. And if you look into the El Cadejo, they'll describe it as being a shaggy dog. And the 3 eyewitnesses I've talked to said it wasn't shaggy, but they did describe that bone white, and the other one's just jet black. But it appears as this dog. It has glowing eyes. Supposedly the white one, kind of protects travelers, drunks, and people who are lost in the woods, and it protects people from its counterpart. I think it's all evil, but that's what I think you ran into. And there's some weird giveaways if you see something like this and you don't think it's a dog. Look at its feet. Most people describe, instead of paws, it has like hooves like a goat, but they're entities you can run into. They're not like ghosts. Everyone or the 3 people I've talked to that have seen it, it was very solid, and it moved kind of how you're describing it, like a flowing motion. And both entities have these glowing eyes, but that's my opinion. That's what I think you ran into.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't get the feeling that it was protective or kind or nice. Like I said, if I'd caught any whiff that this was a dog that wanted a pat on the head, I would have done it. But something told me in my gut that this is a dangerous situation and you need to get away from it now. That's what my deep down inside, that's what my brain was telling me.
I spoke to this witness one time in Spain, and that's why I was asking you if it was northern Spain, because that's where he ran into it. It was up in the mountains, and it was a white one. And he even told me, he goes, I didn't get the feeling like I could walk up and pet this thing. There was something very off. And I almost wonder if that's like our spirit or soul that recognizes something that we physically can't figure out. And so our soul is like, get the hell out of here. But he had that same feeling. He kind of felt like he was in danger. And I can't remember what they call it in Spain. I know in South America, it's the Cadejo or the El Cadejo. Yeah, for the life of me, I can't remember what they call it in Spain. It's basically the same thing. And supposedly the white one protects you from the black one, as ridiculous as that sounds.
I know my science brain, Wes, has a really hard time with this. If I probably hadn't read what I've read about quantum physics and just how much we don't know, scientifically speaking, I don't know if I probably would have just wrote this off as a moment of insanity. I just don't know what I saw, and it scares me. And we've hiked, over the last decade so much, and never seen anything out of the ordinary or scary. I would say 3 times in my hiking, career, life, whatever you want to call it, did I have that gut sense that tells you to stop and turn around. And I always trust my gut, especially if I'm hiking by myself. we have just never encountered anything like this before. We've never heard anything that we could, attribute to Bigfoot either. But this has shaken me to my core. And the more time passes, and it's only been 2 weeks, the more that my logical side of my brain wants to just write this off as, oh no, that didn't happen. But what I keep coming back to and why I know what I saw was real, other than the fact that it moved in front of me and chased me, is the fear that it invoked. That was very real.
Yeah, I would definitely research it. I believe it's spelled Cadejo, I believe. I mean, I have the spelling and grammar skills of like a 2-year-old, so don't quote me on the spelling, but I believe it's Cadejo, and that's a South American version, but you will find one in Spain, and forgive me, I can't remember what the name of it is. Just because something is spiritual doesn't mean it can't be physical. And when you look up that entity, you'll find things like it's often reported with a smell like sulfur. And even though you'll see a list of those different things, it doesn't mean that happens in every encounter. The 3 people I've talked to, none of them smelled anything. But I really appreciate you sharing it on the show. It's been a while since I have heard about this. And as you were describing it, that's the first thing that popped in my head. But I would definitely research it. And I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sharing the account. I know it's kind of disheartening to run into something like this, but do I think it's going to hurt you? No. I have my own ideas on stuff like this, and well, I won't go into that. But I think the chances of you running into it again are probably slim to none. And if this entity you ran into in Spain wanted to hurt you, it could have. I think you did the right thing by leaving. But yeah, that's